Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Get ready to create magic and miracles as you lean into your heart's desires. I believe not only does the heart want what it wants, but it knows. This show is a weekly deep dive into what it means to live from an awakened heart. I'll be sharing inspiring stories and real conversations with people just like you, who have turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. My mission is to show you how you too can be connected and heart-centered in every area of your life. Your journey to aligning with more love, more joy, and your wildest dreams come true starts now. Hello and welcome everyone to the Awaken Heart Podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Walters. Today we have our 80th episode, and I just want to share my appreciation for you who have followed us through this Awaken Heart journey. And I'm so thrilled that we have been able to provide conversations about self-discovery and personal transformation and so many enlightening, empowering stories. Having people really step into their true power. There's so much good out there, and we are here to share it with you. So you and like might be able to do the same, to follow into the footsteps of awakening your own heart. Whatever your soul is calling forward for you to do, to have the courage to really follow and do what really lights you up in this lifetime. So today's conversation, we have the privilege of hosting an expert in human design. Someone who has dedicated her life to unraveling the mysteries of this really profound system. Joining us is Leann Wolff, a renowned figure in the world of human design. Human design, for those of you who aren't really familiar with it or might have just heard about it but don't know quite what it is, it's basically a synthesis. I mean, there's so much to it. There's no basic in the human design at all. It's such an intricate system, but it's based on an ancient wisdom and modern science. It is a blueprint that reveals the unique energies and potentials within each of us. It's a guide to understanding ourselves on a fundamental level, unlocking the keys to a more authentic and purposeful life. Leann Wolff, our esteemed guest, has delved deep into the intricacies of human design. Today, she'll share insights into how the system works, its energy triggers, and how it can fundamentally change the way we relate to ourselves and others. Her forte lies in empowering business owners to self-actualize the potential of their business vision. Through tailored coaching, she aids clients in rediscovering their authenticity and guides them through the blueprint of their natural superpowers. By demystifying the realms of human design and manifestation, Leann empowers entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, and visionaries to wield these tools effectively, propelling their businesses and lives to triumphant heights of alignment and achievement. Leann inspires the new generation of coaches and spiritual entrepreneurs to let go of the shoulda, woulda, coulda mental chatter so that they can embrace and embody the destined direction of their full potential. So get ready for a journey of self-discovery as we explore the transformative power of human design with Leann Wolff. Stay tuned for a conversation that could reshape the way you perceive yourself and the world around you. Hi, Leann. Welcome to the Awaken Heart Podcast.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy for you to hear. I am happy for you to be here as well. Coming from Canada, it seems like this podcast has a lot of affinity with some amazing people and light workers in Canada, and you're one of them. Yes. Awesome. So we're going to talk about a really cool subject that is within all of us. It's called human design, and it's such a fascinating thing how we all have this inside of us. And depending on our human design is how we can show up in the world and how we can maximize our potential. It's a lot to take on, but I know a lot of people that were in the human design field and they were just like, making such huge strides in their life once they really understood their own potential that lied within it. Yeah. So it seems like a lot of people, when they finally find that thing that helps them get over that cusp, maybe they're working a job that isn't fulfilling to themselves. They're feeling the nudge to do something more, or something happens in their life to shift them into this trajectory of awakening to the potential that is within themselves. And you had something that you had a lot of stress in your life, and you adhered to a wake up call that led you to doing the work that you do now. Can you give our audience an idea of what kind of stresses you might have been dealing with and what shifted you into doing the work that you're doing now?
I sure can. So it's a fun story now that I'm out of it and on the other side of it.
Of course.
But
now that you're on the other side, going through it's like, oh,
yes, exactly.
why?
So I was actually a bank manager for a provincial finance bank. And I'd done that for 10 years. And being in the, quote unquote, middle management, there's the pressure from the top and the pressure from the bottom. And you're trying to, resolve everything in that space. And there was just this movement inside of me. The organization, about 3 years prior to me leaving, had indicated that they were going to be taking our old computer system and switching it into a new computer system. And I remember it was so clear. There was just this knowing inside of me that I was like, I'm not going to be here when that new computer system goes live. But you know how you hear that intuitive hit and you're like, okay, you just kind of move on and you're doing your thing. Right. Yeah. And it was 3 years later when we had our quote unquote go live. And in that moment, I just, had known that I was leaving. So about, I'm going to say 2 months prior to leaving the organization, I just had this moment as I was driving to work. And I'm driving to work in my vehicle, driving down the highway, 120 kilometers an hour. And all of a sudden, this heat welled up inside of me. And it was just a very brief second, but I blacked out. And I'm driving. I'm like, hold on a minute. What is happening here? I don't have time to be sick. I can't do this. I got it. I have all these things. I got it right. And it was, I got to work and I was always before anybody else. So I just had this moment in my office and I'm like, this is not right. This is not right that I am feeling this and under this amount of stress. So in that moment, I just knew I was leaving the bank. I made sure that my team was totally ready to go for their go live. Everybody was trained and I gave my notice and I allowed myself time to be on our cattle ranch just to decompress. The stress was so great. I just needed to decompress. So I allowed myself that space. And then when I was ready to step in, I actually typed into Google, new age business, and human design showed up.
Wow. There's so many that could have shown up, and that was it.
That was it. That was it. And it was like, oh, this is interesting. I had kind of dabbled in astrology, didn't really know it, but had dabbled in it. And this popped up and I'm like, oh yeah, there was a big pull, but it wasn't the right website. So it was about a week later, another website popped up and it was the original creator of human design, Ra Uruhu. And it was his book that showed up for me. And I was like, oh, there it is. And 10 years, I was in classes. I have been helping people understand their human design for the last 10 years. And I tried to quit as an entrepreneur. I've tried to quit a couple times and it just keeps me in this space. It wants me to be here. So I'm here.
Mm-hmm. And what was that thing that was causing you to quit? Is it the self-doubt? Is it fear or this?
I think it's just the online game. It's the online game.
Oh God, tell me about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, man, this shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah.
And that was what was, and I was still in classes as well. So I jammed in a 30-year science in a very short period of time. I took multiple classes. So it just felt like a lot, right? And I'm a manifesting generator, 1-3 profile. If any of your audience knows human design, like I have to go to the very depths of what it is that I'm learning so that I can master it. So I took every single class. And as I was doing that, trying to build the business and it was a lot, but it just kept me in its grips, and it doesn't want to let me go. So I'm still here. I'm still playing the online game, and I get to connect with people all over the world. So it's very satisfying. And again, it's, that space where I can recognize, there's frustration here. What am I trying to effort at?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I no longer effort. I just follow the satisfaction of that feeling inside of me. I'm a sacral manifesting generator.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about that satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you feel into it. Can you, so a lot of women, men as well, that are listening to this, they can understand because they're creating businesses of their own as well. And we have to be on that online space. And can you just briefly explain, because I'm sure a lot of my listeners can understand how frustrating, what the frustrations are online that when you're bringing a new business, and how you just want to quit because of the online space. It can drive you crazy. So what are some of the things that you experienced?
So when I look at my design, I don't have what we call the enterprise channel or the sales channel. I have PR, but I don't have the sales channel. And I don't think in a quote unquote manipulative or persuasive way. Let's just put it that way. So the channel that I'm talking about is the 4426, from the spleen up to the ego or the heart center, for any of your people that
I'm looking
follow
at a
human
chart
design.
now.
Okay. And what it is it's all about this transmission aspect of being able to really navigate that space between manipulation and persuasion. And the online space for me, I feel, has really gone down this path of manipulation versus really helping people and helping them move into the aspect of transitioning their patterns, because that's really what enterprise is all about. Leaving those old patterns behind and moving into a new pattern, so everybody wins.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one aspect that, it's not that I work on it, I just have to recognize it, that I don't have to be manipulative. I can just be myself. I have to remind myself of this still 10 years into this, knowing my design. I'm like, nope, I just have to be me. Because the deeper I go into who I am and stand in that, then the people that need to connect with me, that hear me along my movement in life, they will be there. They will come into the coaching programs. They will come into the mentorship. They'll just be there.
Mm-hmm. Because in essence, you're aligning with the truth of who you are. And on a vibratory level, you're going to align with those that are seeking you out. Whereas you're not efforting in it. And as we've seen on the online space, it keeps changing so much. I mean, my friend and I launched a business, and we can't keep up with the videos. Like, it's changing, the AI and all these fancy freaking videos. And there's a lot of manipulation on there. Hey, do this. And they're having a lot of, now anyone can create their own course or their ebooks or their content just from AI. But it really comes down to the person, and what you bring to the table in truth is what's going to attract those people to you. So that's a very important thing, aligning and not efforting in that space. So briefly, can you explain the key components in human design and how it works?
I can. So the system itself is born from ancient wisdom. So Western astrology, the Kabbalah tree of life, the Hindu chakra system, and the Chinese I Ching, and it marries it with today's like quantum physics and biomechanics. And through this marriage of ancient and future wisdom, what it does is, at the core, it really is a decision-making tool. And what it's asking us to do is to drop deeper into the intelligence of the physical body. So we talk about AI, we talk about, all technology. If when we just pull back, we can see that science and technology is really trying to replicate the wisdom and the intelligence of the physical body and how our mind is connected to the consciousness field. Like, we have this massive technology here. And when we pull back and start to witness how our conditioning tries to pull us down all these paths, but there's this deep wisdom inside of us. And when we drop into that, that's what human design is teaching us, is that there's a wisdom deep inside our cellular structure to make decisions, so that when we're walking along our pathway and navigating this particular 3D world that we're in, we can do it with more ease, with more grace, with the sensations of success and peace and satisfaction versus frustration and anger and, all of those negative emotions, because the conditioned mind isn't running the show anymore. It's the intelligence of the mind, body, spirit walking. Mm-hmm. So it's a really, on the surface level, it's about, it's truly about decision making. Once you go deeper, it's about leaning into the strengths and the characteristics of who you are, what you're designed to represent. And then seeing those weaknesses, like, for example, the 4426 that I don't have, seeing those weaknesses and going, you know what, I can hire that out. I can actually bring on consultants that can do this for me, instead of trying to effort at the weakness, just standing in those strengths and moving from there. That is really what human design does for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like every teaching about how, the universe is within yourself, that it all starts within. If you want to change the world, you got to change yourself first.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And can you go over, I think they're called profiles. I'm not sure. I know I'm a generator. Aren't there just 4 or 5? Like, I know there's a manifestor, there's generator. And what are the other ones? And can you briefly explain? I know there's so much that goes into each characteristic, but briefly what each characteristic is.
Sure. So I use the original teachings of Ra. So there's 4 types. We have our projectors. Projectors are really designed to be guides. They are they're our advisors, because what their superpower really is they get to connect with the generators and manifesting generators. They get to connect with that energy field and see it, and really get good at asking that particular type, the generators and manifesting generators, really good questions, so that they begin to operate correctly. And in order for that to happen, what the projector really desires from us is to be noticed and recognized, and then invited in as those really prominent key advisors in our lives. Okay. So those projectors, once that invitation is there and they trust the intelligence of their body, they will know who to connect with. They will know that correct energy to connect with. Then we have our generators and our manifesting generators. This is the largest group of people, and that's 70%. And what we are, because you're a generator, I'm a manifesting generator, what we're designed actually to do is we are designed to use our energy frequency to build and create and be really creative processes on this planet. But our thing is we are designed to respond. So people need to request our energy. Okay, that might look like questions, the universe, the consciousness field, it's going to request that energy. Because I see that big red square, that sacral center on the chart. I look at it like a cosmic battery. Like, we have this energy field, and then other people get to tap into it. We get to use it for ourselves, but other people get to also utilize it and then guide it. So we're these really creative energy fields, but we need to respond to where we're going to use our energy. Then we have our manifestors. Our manifestors They're here to, they're also creative beings, but they're creative beings in a way where they have this auric field that's it's closed and repelling. Now, that might sound negative, but what they're designed to do is they're actually designed to create spaces for the creativity. So they have this really strong energy field where they can move the resistance out of the way so that that creative moment can happen. They are what we call our initiators. Okay. They're here to initiate, like I see them as Moses, right? They initiate that parting of the seas so that there can be this creative movement forward. So their role is to just open up these spaces for the rest of us to build and create and be guided in. And then we have our reflectors. Our reflectors are so interesting. What their whole superpower is, Nancy, is they are designed to really reflect back what's happening in our community, what's happening in our world. They are the cosmic mirrors that say, you know, we're on track here or we're not on track. They are designed to be initiated into communities or, you know, board seats on organizations so that they can really reflect objectively. This is what I see and this is what's going on. So in a way, they kind of evaluate the community so that we can get like a clean report on like what's happening, what's going on. And they need to be initiated. They need to be brought into these spaces, asked, invited, and initiated into these spaces because they hold such great wisdom. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah, it does. I took all my little notes. So going to my charts, just so the people that are listening and aren't looking at the video, I'm going to put a one of these charts, not mine particular, but I'll put a sample one in just so you can get an idea of what we're talking about here. So it looks like a spine going down and there's all this like energy around it. And then there's like at the bottom and the left, are they always those colors? And then the red is in the middle where like your sacral energy is. So we've got this like, looks like a spine with all these numbers in it. It looks like there's a lot to learn, but
yes,
man, it looks like you master the universe once you understand this. So going off of my chart, I've got the red, the red sacral. What would you look at here? So I've got like, it's red and then there's the areas in white and then there's numbers that are like colored in.
Okay. So when I first look at a chart, it's to recognize what is you and what isn't you. That's what design really, it goes, once you understand your decision making, then we want to go, okay, well, what is me? What isn't me? Anything that is white in the chart, you're designed to interact with that energy from other people or through the transits. So they have all of these, skills or strengths or energy field, and then you get to interact with them. So anything that's colored in, this isn't a religious process, okay? But I see it as like, this is what the consciousness field has said, like, I want you to represent this. So anything that is activated by the planets, this is yours to represent. These are your strengths. These are your attributes. And other people are going to come to you for this energy. So for you, you have the sacral, the root, and the spleen as the centers that are defined. So other people come into your energy field because they're like, oh, she brings me this safety. She has this real energy field that we can tap into. She's really creative. We can look at her and go, oh, hey, Nancy, you bring us this really interesting fuel and pressure for us to look at our own cycles in our life, to get really innovative, to look at our own individuality. You bring that energy and you represent it. So the more individual, innovative, and the capacity for you to be healthy and well and in this survival mode, I want to say, Through that, you move through cycles in your life. You probably really notice cyclical energy in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can probably almost on a calendar recognize, I started this, I ended this, I started this, I ended this. These moments in your life that happen, and other people are really interested in learning that from you. They want to know, like, how do you innovate? Like, what are the things that you innovate? How do you correct your own patterns? And because they see that you're a great nurturer in this, you have these resources that just, keep giving and keep giving. They want to understand that from you. So they come into your world and go, help me recognize this. And how can we work together so that you use your energy field and they use their energy field? Okay. And that noise that you just made, that's the sacral center. When the sacral center feels like, yep, you've totally tapped into me. You know who I am. I agree with this. I'm engaged in this conversation. You'll hear that noise. The head's nodding. For anybody that's on the audio, Nancy's head is nodding. That's what that sacral energy, because we are designed to respond. And the intelligence of the body is indicating, I'm engaged with this. Yep, there's energy here for this. If it wasn't engaged, it pushes back, it leans out. It's like, right? There's like this head shake, like, no, you're totally not on the same page as me.
Yeah, that's like my dating for the last 10 years. You're like, oh no.
There you go. That's your sacral indicating, right? And it's so profound. And once you can pull back and really witness it, it's guiding you. It's been guiding you your whole life. And when you trust it, that is where magic starts to happen. Right.
And it's wait to respond. When I pulled up this chart, I'm like, oh, okay,
Yes.
in my own life, I'm being reactive to a lot of things, but just take a breath, wait, and then use my energy. And that's where the power is. So going back to the colors, and then the white areas are what I'm interacting in the world, or how I respond to the world. So somebody else's chart where mine's all colored in, theirs might not be colored in those areas.
Right.
So they're responding to me, right?
So they're connecting with you because they want to understand your energy field. They're
Okay.
going, hey, like, what does it mean to be tenacious? That 38-28, that channel that you have. Okay. There's this tenacity to be individual. So it goes from the root center up to the spleen. And that tenacity helps you survive. That's how you get through. It feels very individual. People go, Nancy's kind of, she's kind of weird. She's really weird because she's individual. She wants to live life individually, not being in this conformity. And people are like, God, that's weird. But they want to find out about it. They get really curious about it. It's like, what is going on here? So they come into your world because they want to learn that. Okay. And then anything that's like, for example, the solar plex, the ego center, the identity center, the throat, the ajna, and the head center in your body graph, they're all undefined. So what you're going to learn how to interact with emotions. You're going to go, I don't have to react to any of this. That's where the intelligence comes in. I can just watch the emotions of other people just come and go and ebb and flow, but I don't have to get pulled into that. You're going to learn about the material plane and the ego, meaning, those people that can operate on the material plane, like with lots of humble activity, those that are really egotistical on the material plane, you're learning about that. Okay. You get to see that, witness that, look at that in other people. And then identity and direction in that G center that's totally open. Mine is also like that. We're always like, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. So it's interesting to interact with different people that are doing things that you don't do. So you learn from them. You learn, how do they love themselves? What direction are they taking? Why are they going that way? These are all things that you get to tap into and watch and learn. In the throat center, you get to assimilate all of that individuality that you have and speak on that individuality. But your actions that you take are designed to come from that movement of the sacral, that engagement. Okay. And then the head center and the ajna center being undefined. What you're learning there so deeply, Nancy, is you're learning, what should I be focusing on? What kind of concept is like floating through my mind here? So you get to learn so much about how the mind actually operates, right? And then you get really curious about it and go, oh, okay, I keep having this thought over and over and over and over. Why am I having that thought over and over and over and over? What do I need to learn from that? So you get to learn your mind and then interact with other people that have a very fixed way of thinking, right? And when they have a fixed way of thinking, you're like, oh, it's really hard to change their mind. You don't have to change their mind. Just get curious about how do they actually think, right? Watching them, either they're really logical or they're really caught up in stories. And then you just get to watch it, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's becoming an observer to your thoughts, an observer to the people around you, the actions around you. So in that regards, what in human design and what you just explained, a lot of people get triggered by other people. What are the triggers if we're responding to other people? What are the triggers in this understanding of human design?
Mostly the triggers are coming from us trying to be something that we're not. And then that shows up in our lives. It mirrors to us, right? And then we go internally and we try to motivate ourselves through negative self-talk, creates that reaction. People are triggering us. So what design does is it says, hold on a minute. We do not need to be quote unquote triggered. We just have to see it and then recognize what is that emotion that's going through us? What happened that emotion went through us? And you teach this, right? This is the whole gig. It's emotional intelligence. That every thought that we have, there's 80 to 150 thoughts, 1,000 thoughts that go through our mind every day. Probably like maybe 10 of those are for us. So the witnessing and the discernment, that's key for human design. It's the discernment process. What am I interacting with here? And what do I need to learn from this? Why is this happening to me? What can I pull out of this? What is the wisdom here? So we're going to feel those things, but as you walk along your pathway, you start to recognize, oh, that isn't me. They're just representing that. I don't need to be that. I can just be me and interact with that. Does that kind of?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So going back to my family stuff, my sister, she has zero emotional intelligence, like dealing with someone that has zero, just doesn't know how to handle her emotions. She's just all over the place. I've tried to help her recognize it, but she just doesn't. So anything that I try to, it's like shining on the light, like waking someone up and shining a light in their face, but they're not ready to wake up or see. Yeah. So I've been I try not to be reactive, but I've been really reactive to a lot of things that are happening. Yes. So in essence, in the way to deal with someone that's emotionally unintelligent or whatever is coming at me is just to pull back, become a witness and observe. Yeah. And don't try to change. Just like, okay, this is interesting. Okay, what is this response coming up in me? Why am I feeling this way? And just pulling out.
So if I look at your the solar plexus in your design, you have the 22 and the 6 they're called dormant gates. Okay. There's a deep wisdom there for you. The 6 is all about boundaries. This is your truth and transformation. Okay. The 6 is designed for quote unquote conflict. Okay. It's designed to see conflict through a new lens and then create boundaries and balance. So do you do any breath work?
I have, but I haven't done
Okay.
it consistently. Yeah. I love breath
Okay.
work. I go, whoo, who needs
Yes,
ayahuasca? I can do breath work.
exactly.
Yeah.
That is the six. Okay. That six gate hanging there. It's the diaphragm. And what the diaphragm does when it expands and contracts and you play with that breath work, it creates a new pH in the blood, which then creates a new balance for your physical body. So anytime there's conflict, start to tap into your breath. Okay. And in my experience for, the last 10 years, looking at that 22, the 22 is so very interesting. It's your Mars. So it is, this space where you're always maturing. The 22 has a deep, let's say, grief involved in it. So you're cyclical with the 5342 at the bottom. There's these moments, and when you close a cycle, it feels like there's a grief. It feels like there's a loss. So the 22 is always allowing you to learn about how to grieve a cycle. So, for example, with your sister, she may never move into emotional intelligence. She may not, right? And it's about recognizing that you will go through a grief process around that because there's an expectation. And, I don't want to say that there's a hope, but there's this expectation that we all can mature and grow and become awake. But that's not true for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that 22 is always teaching you that there can be a grief in every cycle that you go through. And every time you master that grief, move through that grief, now you get to progress forward. Now there's this space where you can, leave that behind and go into the next version of who you are.
Mm-hmm. So instead of trying to change, you're just accepting as it is. Because some people just will never get there. I mean, you can try and then it's like, okay.
Right. Yeah. And if you have the wherewithal to be able to pull up her chart, right, at some point, and be able to recognize who is she, because most of the time when we're seeing reactive human beings is they don't know who they are. They're not relying on their strengths. So, like, when we're not using our muscles, they atrophy. Right. So when we're not relying on the strengths of our human design, our decision making, the channels that are defined in there, any of the attributes, the characteristics, when we don't rely on it, they start to atrophy. And then the conditioned mind pulls us into going, well, I should get better at this. So we start efforting at our weaknesses, which then our strengths continue to atrophy. So when we flip the script, like design asks us to, and says, just focus in on your strengths and build that consistency and that capacity and stand in that, then all of a sudden we have the strength and the wherewithal to now interact with what we need to and not feel like we have to effort. So with your sister, it'd be interesting to see, like, what's her type? What are her strengths? And then when you're interacting with her, you can have conversations to kind of pull her into those strengths, right? Pull her more into that decision making. And she doesn't even need to be aware that you're doing that, right? But the conversation is there so that all of a sudden that truth of who she is gets triggered versus the not self getting triggered and being in that reactive state. Now all of a sudden you're pulling on those strengths, and then she can start to interact with those strengths, right? And that's the beauty of these mechanics, is that once you know it, now the conversation changes.
That's really powerful. Well, some things to definitely look at. I'm sure a lot of people are going to recognize these dynamics. So this is very helpful because we've got a holiday coming up where A lot of people over the holidays, especially Thanksgiving, they're
Yes.
going to families or back to like, a household that might not have been very supportive or whatever dynamics were going on when they're growing up. So
Mhm.
I hear
Yep.
so many stories about this. So this can help a lot of people during the Thanksgiving, Christmas holidays.
100%.
Yeah.
For sure. Because the more we're centered, right? The more we trust ourselves, our decision making, and the more we recognize, oh, we're actually designed to interact with some of these people, right? We're designed to interact with them because we're designed to gain the wisdom. Whether that person is operating correctly or not, those are terminologies that human design uses, right? Because this is all mechanics. Whether they're operating correctly or not, that's not up to us to change it. But what we can do is go, what am I learning here? What do I see here? And then the conversation can change because now you start to converse and pull out those strengths and they can start to recognize it.
So everyone listening, I don't know if this is going to get out before Thanksgiving, but before Christmas. So listen and learn. Yeah. Instead of being triggered, instead of wanting to throw the gravy across the room or
right.
the cranberries at someone's face, like listen and learn.
Yeah.
It's really, really great.
And most of the time when we can lean out of the reaction, now we leave all those dense frequencies behind, right? Like greed and, jealousy and all those things that are really dense. We just start to leave them behind. They're no longer interacting with us in our frequency. And when we're not triggered by it, we're not lowering ourselves to all of that energy field. When we hold center and we trust ourselves, now our frequency goes up. So they either entrain to it or they just move away. Right? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does. Yeah. And while you were saying that, it just made me think of my last relationship or some of the relationships. Like my last relationship, he would say stuff that was like really hurtful, or he'd say stuff and I wouldn't react to it. I'd have to always, I'd hear it and then I'd have to think about it. And then I'd have to address it and then he was like, well, you didn't defend yourself, because I did in the moment. I think about things afterwards in defense. I'm sure a lot of people feel that's the same way. It's like, did he really say that? Was that meant to? But then I would be afraid to address it and not talk about it. I just let it go by the wayside. I learned you have to talk about these things.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm going to say, like, if you have his design, then you get to really understand, is this coming from his not self?
His not self?
Yeah, like the open centers. We call that the not self, the conditioned aspect, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like those open areas, all that white in the chart. That's like I see it as like the revolving door in a mall. That's where we go out and have experiences, but that's where people actually get to come in and have experiences with us. Mm-hmm. Right? So when we know the other design, when we know the other person's design, what we can do is start to go, oh, I am hearing the trauma. Maybe it's the trauma of the emotions, right? Or the trauma of not knowing their own direction, right? Maybe it's the trauma of not feeling safe in their life. Now, all of a sudden, you can hear the trauma and you don't have to interact with it. You can guide it in a different manner. You can pull it out of that trauma and start asking different questions. And through those different questions, then you're pulling out their strengths versus all the trauma. So most likely, those interactions are coming from a traumatic place that they had. They've never ever processed that. And because they haven't processed that, they're living from this conditioned not self. Mm-hmm. So they speak through that, trying to pull you down to that density. And when you stand in your center and you stand in the strength, you can't get pulled down into their game. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow, this is just incredible. This is something that everyone needs to, because how you're going to show up in the world, how you're going to relate to everyone, each other, is so 1,000 times different than how we're relating now. And this is something that's going to bring us into new earth, because
Mhm.
we're going to recognize things without being triggered by them. We're going to really see a person in a whole different way. We're going to learn,
Yeah.
listen, and we're actually going to be open to that person and really understanding them. I think that's so cool.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep. Yep. And so I've just had information bump into me through Dr. Daniel Amen, Amen. And he's a psychologist, but he's he calls himself a brain doctor. And he's done like 250,000 brain scans. Okay. And he can see childhood trauma. There's a pattern
wow.
that shows up in the brain. There's holes that are created from childhood trauma. He can see when someone bounces a soccer ball off their head. Maybe they're soccer players. There is a particular way that your brain, there's a trauma that happens actually inside the brain. So most of what we're interacting with, we're actually interacting with unhealthy bodies and unhealthy brains. And through that unhealthiness, our minds aren't operating correctly. The functions of our bodies, the chemicals, the hormones, the way we activate our breathing, all of that, we're not healthy body-wise. So in design, there's a deeper level of study, which is called primary health system. And the creator, Ra Uru, is like, if we don't have a healthy brain and we don't have a healthy body, then all the rest of this is never going to work. So when I found like this Dr. Daniel Amen bumped into me, I'm like, okay, there it is we're trying to fix our minds, but actually it's the brain and the body that isn't healthy. Once the brain can actually repair itself, because it can, and he does this every day with his clients through nutrition and understanding ourselves. Once the brain can repair, then the mind can actually operate correctly. Right.
So the mind, as far as conscious, because if you open up someone's head and look at the brain, it's just this like big piece of like wavy meat, like hamburger.
Right. Yep.
And we're healing it by the proper nutrition, because that's going to give you whatever you need inside it to work correctly. But then it's in the emotional body, because it's all energetics, which is in your mind. Like, because if you're going to pull out a thought, like where are you going to go into the brain to find that thought, or where are you going to, find that trauma? You're going to look at the brain, you're not going to see it.
Yep.
So does he see it where the trauma is with the holes? Does he see that as an electro, either holes, but is it electric, like red or blue? Or
so it's like it's the nervous system, right? And that's like the the epicenter of the part of the nervous system besides our heart, which also has neurons, right? Because we're this electromagnetic thing walking around. And when the brain has holes in it and it has the trauma, then the neural pathways are not connecting. So when the mind has a thought, it can't actually connect correctly, right? It keeps running this same pattern and trying to it's running around these holes, right? Versus once the holes are filled in, now there's a different thought pattern. Now the neural pathways can connect in different ways. And I think that's honestly, that's, this is just my opinion, my observation through the food system, through the quote unquote, if you want to call it medical system.
Absolutely.
Right. Healthcare system.
Sick care.
Right. Sick care. Right. Everything was just masked. Nothing's actually addressed. So once the physical body and the brain can repair, then we're unstoppable. Our psychology can repair. Right. But until that aspect happens, our psychology is going to be off, and we're going to be triggered because we haven't been taught, and then the neural pathways they can't fire correctly. Right.
Yeah.
And that's really where
loop.
Yeah. And that's where emotional intelligence comes from, is the nervous system. Yeah.
Yeah. It's creating those new neural pathways, bridges. And that's when they don't create that. There's the loop. It just stays there. The little holes stay there. And we're not being taught the proper ways now. Like, I mean, a lot of parents have gotten to see how their children are being educated in indoctrination camps, and feeding them all kinds of stuff, not to think for yourself. It's your fault. And it's like getting put into all these little boxes of gender or like color.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
no, this needs to
Yeah.
be taught at a very young level. And what's great nowadays is because of what's happened over the last couple of years and seeing how the education is, seeing how the medical system is, there's new pods being created where their parents are taking their children out of school and teaching them
That's
something
right.
like this and
Yes.
teaching them to be empowered beings, how to meditate, how to be a powerful human creator. And we're seeing a lot of
Yes.
that now. And I hope more parents do that and more people get outside the system.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And it was all designed for this. Okay. So we're coming out of the cross of planning. In the human design terminology, we call it the cross of planning. And what that was designed for 411 years was that we actually took our authority and handed it over to these large organizations. And it was designed for that, right? So that now we're going through this quote unquote great awakening, right? This new earth. And what it is reintegrating with the magic of this physical body, our psychology, the consciousness field. And how we do that is by reintegrating our decision making, taking back our authority from these large organizations and these, structures that they were designed to do this so that we could have this awakening. So for the next 411 years, that's our path to reintegrate decision making, take back our authority, recognize that the physical body has this intelligence, that when the brain and the body are nourished correctly, like truly human beings can be unstoppable.
And I've seen some of that with Joe Dispenza's work with the heart, the coherence and the brain, heart, the heart mind coherence, and just seeing those wavelengths. Like it's so fascinating. Like, oh my gosh, they're having this otherworldly experience and it's showing up in these graphs. It's showing up like his work. I think it's absolutely incredible because then you have a tangible for what is actually happening. So I just got chills all over my body just thinking about that. And, and this all ties into that. And that's what's going to change the consciousness, a collective consciousness, because really a lot of people gave their authority over with this whole one size fits all medical intervention.
Right.
That's people are waking up to like, what did I do? And some people are still buying into it. But then of course, whatever they're interacting with just was what they have in this lifetime. So we've seen a lot happen over these last crazy years, and I think it's going to continue getting crazier. Buckle up.
Yeah. And when we're talking about this shift in the terminology of human design from the cross of planning to the cross of the sleeping phoenix, 2027 is like where the switch happens. Now, of course, we know that energy wise, like there's still going to be the old energy and then the blending with the new energy. And we can see that, right? We can see that right now. Those that are starting to awaken, see these things, and those that are still steeped in giving governments their authority, right? And then there's the other ones that are like, nope, we're taking back our authority. So there's going to be this, overlap for a while, but that's where we're moving. We're moving to this space where the World Economic Forum and the UN and all these spaces that we're, like they're trying there, and you can see the desperation, right? Because they also recognize that the energy is changing. So they're really clamping down because it's like, oh, we can't have all these human beings actually have authority. What are you talking about? Right. So
it's like this cult that's operated for hundreds and hundreds of years. And, you hear about the ascension, you hear about raising the energy level on the planet. And that's absolutely what happened when you tune in. It's like, what the hell is going on now? It just is such disarray, but that's on purpose to keep the energies down. But people are popping awake like popcorn, and they're the ones that are going to lead the way.
I totally see that. And like Joe Dispenza, like I'm surprised that he's actually still on YouTube, right? Because it's like they don't want people to know that like everything is inside of you. You can repair everything inside of you.
100%. And there's been others that were under attack over the last couple of years, like Bruce. When that thing just happened, I was like, I'm not feeding in the collective consciousness of fear before I was even awakened to what actually was going on in the 3D world, where I was like, oh my God, I'm in what the hell, trying to warn the world. But so I listened to like Bruce Limpton, I listened to like Kuz Flaxon, and then Greg Braden. So I understand about the body and how powerful we were. That was the first person when this came out, he explained, I think it was Bruce Lipton. No, it was Greg Braden that did a whole presentation on what it was and what it does to the body and how consciousness can. So I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. And it's so funny because Greg Braden actually has a book called Human Design.
Oh,
and it's totally like, it's not this human design, but it is the human design. And it indicates like we are powerful beyond imagination.
And it was cool over that time. I don't know if you have a heart out at 12 because we can.
No, I don't.
Okay. So we'll be wrapping up this soon. Just like one or two more questions. What was interesting during that time is like people that didn't speak up about it. They just kind of, there's some that kind of like went with the narrative and started pushing the agenda. I'm like, oh my God, I loved you, but now I can't pay attention to you anymore.
Yes.
But the ones that were speaking out, as we saw it go really topsy-turvy, and Bruce Lipton was one of them. He's like, what the heck? There's so much respect for all these individuals that talked about it. Like, well, no, that's not how the body works. Epigenetics says this. And yeah, so much respect to everyone like that. Yeah. So, and there's a lot of charlatans, of course, in the self-development world as well. And you got to be able to use your discernment to, really follow, you don't follow anyone, but just get your information for those that really, really resonate you. And that helps from knowing who you are, and human design will help with that.
It totally will.
Yeah.
And, I'll just throw in when you talk about epigenetics, so we can look at design like that too. So anything that's activated through the planets. So the definition, any gates, channels, centers in your design, that's like your DNA, RNA. That's what that's that percentage of your DNA, RNA that you're like, yep, I know this, I can do this. Now the openness is like the epigenetics, right? That's where our conditioning comes in. So we get to interact with that conditioning and discern, oh, this conditioning field is actually going to teach me something, or this conditioning field is not good for me. I'm walking away from this interaction. My sacral's pulling me out. I'm out. Right. So that's, when we go to that level and we look at that, just see the openness as there's potential there. There's potential to learn, or there's potential to just disengage and walk away. Right.
And what you're talking about there, it just made me think of that medical intervention that was forced upon the masses with the messenger RNA. Yep. So you're putting this thing inside your body that is going to, essentially override your humanness or your own human potential. So this thing that is inside many people right now, it's just overriding. It's just like it's overriding a lot of people's innate immune system and their intelligence. So on purpose, because we're moving into this new cycle where it's to keep everyone down, and we're seeing people suffering from it right now. And we've only seen the tip of the iceberg right now, unfortunately, but people are awake to it. I know there's more coming at us, but much more people that had fallen for it the first time aren't falling for it again. So I don't think they have as much power over us as what they came out with in these last couple of years.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And, and then you look at our food system, right? Like they're trying to get us to just basically eat processed food.
Appeal. Yeah. Come on now.
Yeah.
Crushing like the local farmers, making it so hard for them to farm, and Bill Gates, thank you very much. What he's doing is no good. So we have to pay attention to our foods, and what more than ever, fluoride, what's in our water. They're trying to put this RNA into our water, or what is it? Yeah, I'm like, that mRNA, that is not going in my body. So we really have to pay attention now.
Yeah, we totally do. And as a cattle rancher here in Alberta, I've been watching that for 8 years. I've been watching how they're changing the weather patterns.
Oh yeah.
Making it more difficult for the hay to grow. So then we cannot feed the cattle, and the real big push to vaccinate all the cattle. And we don't do that either. Our cattle are totally clean. They get nothing because it's like, no, our herd doesn't need that. No. They're healthy. They're strong.
No. And I've had to give up eating meat a lot. I'll go into a grocery store because it's so expensive to get the kind of beef that you might be raising. But I look at something, here's, I'd love to make a roast, and here's one on sale. I'm like, I can't responsibly buy that. I can't
Right.
buy that. Who knows what's in it, what they've done to the animals and all that stuff. So, I mean, there's a whole lot we can dive into
Yes,
here.
I know. I know. I could talk forever.
Yeah, I know. Me
And
too.
all I would say on that is do your best to connect with a local farmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the key, because unfortunately what most people are getting through the grocery stores, it has all been altered. They might call it organic, but that's probably not a truth. It's
Or
probably not a
natural
truth.
flavoring and
That's right.
like what we have in our foods is banned in like 30 countries, like
That's right.
so much stuff. I don't,
Exactly.
glyphosate was another thing that was happening. It's
Yeah.
just craziness, but we have a lot of local farmers around here. We had a farmer's market, not anymore, but might pay a little more, but your body's going to thank you for it.
Yeah. And you can actually eat less
Yeah.
because it's
Tastes better.
actually nourishing your body and your brain, so that now once the brain and body are repaired, it's no longer craving the chemical stuff that's in the food that's creating the craving.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Like we don't eat that much food because everything is, it's clean. And so we don't have to eat that much.
And if you think about in Europe, where their food quality is a lot better, you just get this like, especially wee France, where you get these little plates. You're like, oh, okay, there's my little piece, but you're satisfied and you're satiated.
Yes.
Their refrigerators are tiny because they go and buy fresh stuff every day. Their eggs are sitting on shelves. So like, why is it on a shelf? Because it's fresh. Milk is on the shelf. So we have a lot to learn from that, even though that's getting invaded as well. So, all right. Well, this has been such a awesome conversation. I love listening to someone like yourself. I learned so much. I'm always for learning. I learned a lot from you. My audience has learned a lot from you. So if people anyone listening wants to dive in deeper and work with you, how can they get a hold of you? What's your best way to get a hold of you? And do you have any? I know everyone can go online and sign up for your email and get a human design profile created. So can you tell us a little bit?
Sure. So website is the best, www.powerofself.ca, because I am Canadian. So it is .ca, and you can get your chart there. If you want to learn human design and bring it into your own coaching program, I also have a human design self-study, which now includes a mentorship. So you can come in, we play with charts, we get really experienced at that, so that you can go into your own coaching program or into your family or wherever it is and know human design so deeply that you're not triggered anymore because you're in that centered space. I also have VIP coaching as well that I do, where I help entrepreneurs build out their businesses based off of their human design, so that they're centered. They're not like me wanting to quit, right? Because you're coming from this centered space and you just build your entire business structure and your offers from your design. Okay? So I know I'm not supposed to, in the marketing world, right, give you more than one option, but I have more than one option. I have the VIP coaching, I have the self-study human design and the mentorship, or you can just grab your chart, just like Nancy did, and just take a look at it and then start to play.
Why wouldn't you give? It's taught to only give one offer.
That's all the marketing tells you. Just keep everybody very siloed in one offer. And I'm like, nope, I have lots of options. And they can also find me on YouTube, Nancy. I have my goodness. I have like, I don't know how many videos on there, and you can learn so much on there because that's what I do. I like to teach. I think that it is so important for us to be fully centered so that we can navigate this chaos.
Yeah, because you're giving, you're serving, you're giving, you're serving everybody by your YouTube, like giving for free. And then you give so much, like the free charts, and then, they can dive in deeper with your work here. And I've made notes of myself. I'm going to be looking up your programs. Seriously. Awesome. Yes. So it's been wonderful having you on. I have one last question that I ask all my guests. And what does that mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
It really is allowing my values and being fully satisfied. So I'm an introvert. I like to be able to be on my farm and hang out with my cows and my dog and my husband. And that's really important to me. And that awakens my heart. When I can walk out and just pet my cows and hang out with them, I know that the world is okay because I'm okay.
Yeah, I love that. And it's simplicity.
Yes.
Hanging with your cows. Hanging with your cows. Mine is I walk out into nature, go to the trails, and hang out with my cats. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. We got away from that. And like my cows and the birds that are here eating and my dog and my cats, like they don't know about the chaos. They're just like, nope, let's just hang out and be in a space of love. So
isn't that interesting? We always hear about nature, how it's our greatest teacher, because literally if you walk outside, look at your animals and or go on a walk or look at the trees, it just is. And it's just natural, the way they forest for food, the way they get the sun for their leaves. It's a beautiful thing. We can learn a lot.
It is beautiful.
Return to our own inherent nature.
Yes. And, I'm just throwing an example here. So this spring, there was lots of fires around us, lots of forest fires. And of course, there's all the fear mongering from the news and the people in charge, right? Just total fear mongering. And I just looked at my cows and they're all hanging out, chewing their cud. They're like, we're not scared. We're not worried. The birds were still here eating out of the feeders. I'm like, I have nothing to fear. Once they show me that there's something to fear, then we'll look at that. But they're like, nope, they were totally cool. Everything was cool. So when we use that as a gauge instead of the news and the fear mongering, totally different story.
And that just made me think of something real quick. I remember in my old condo when I lived in Sherman Oaks, I watched The Grudge by myself. And I had stairs that went up to my bedroom. You know that.
Yeah.
Stairs up to my bedroom. At that time, I had 4 cats. Yes, I'm a cat lady. I had 4 cats because I had a huge place. So I'm like, okay, all right. That wasn't the best thing to watch just before I went to go to bed. But okay, my cats, I'm going to bring them in here. I'm going to close the door. And unless they freak out, I'm fine. If they start freaking out, I'm just going to run and jump off that balcony. I'm fine.
Yes, exactly. They're light years ahead of our own consciousness. Like we can trick ourselves and hypnotize ourselves into any kind of fear. They're like, nope, you can't do that to me.
Well, this has been such an inspiring, wonderful conversation. I'm excited for all that are listening to find Leann and work with her. And dive into the human design. It's inherent. It's in all of us. And, when we do, the whole world's going to change. Our world changes and the whole world around us changes. So thank you, Leann, so much for joining us today.
Great conversation.
Thank you. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Awaken Heart podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, share it with a friend. And if you haven't already, head on over to your favorite podcast app to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback, you can reach me at theawakenheartpodcast.com.